Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and look, I'm not going to say that the Dungeons & Dragons movie is going to fail amid the ongoing Wizards of the Coast and Papa Hasbro controversy. I am just saying that a lot of people ready to hoist that Jolly Roger, and that might be bad for the box office. Let's go ahead and go through here, because Dungeons & Dragons fans call for boycott of Honor Among Thieves movie. You know, it's funny that this headline is popping up. I was actually on the phone with one of my best friends yesterday, massive Dungeons & Dragons fan, great Dungeon Master as well, and we were talking about this because we were going to go see the film together. We've both been really excited for it. Obviously, I've had some reservations because, well, we all know how Hollywood is nowadays, and I'm not exactly a fan of what woke Hollywood could do to Dungeons & Dragons, which already has so much invested in the characters you create. There's just certain things that are going to be off limits, but I thought I'll give it a chance. It looks fun. It looks like it actually caters to the Monty Python-esque spirit that crops up so often in D&D campaigns, no matter how bad we want it to be, you know, Lord of the Rings. But with all the new Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro stuff going on, I just don't want to give them the money. And he doesn't either. I was flabbergasted to find out. I thought for sure that he would say, you know what, it's still a D&D movie, let's go see it. But even when he said he was thinking about disregarding the film just because of, well, the OGL controversy, that's when I realized this is probably going to hit even the most diehard fans pretty big. That being said, let's go through the article, see what it has to say, and we'll go from there. Tabletop role-playing fans are calling for a boycott of Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. With Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast currently under scrutiny for controversial actions, the success or failure of the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons film could impact the game as well. Well, to be fair, not only the success and failure of the film, but they just ordered a Paramount Plus live-action show. That could also be tarnished by what they're doing with the OGL right now. So yeah, while Honor Among Thieves is the one that's on the horizon that everyone is the most concerned about and worried about, let's not pretend this won't also trickle down into future Dungeons & Dragons endeavors, especially if Paizo is considering truly moving forward with the lawsuit that they were talking about and giving fans a much better alternative that is more akin to the original OGL. The boycott's being called because Wizards of the Coast's recent decision to change the open gaming license in 1D&D. Rumors, statements, and insider leaks show Dungeons & Dragons were trying to revoke the OGL, imposing new restrictions and control over third-party creators. This has caused players to cancel their D&D Beyond subscriptions en masse. Yeah, from what I heard, more than 40,000 canceled subscriptions. That is insane, considering that's how Wizards made so much of their money, besides, you know, people buying physical books and whatnot. So the subscriptions, to my understanding, were $2.99 to $5.99. So on the low end, they lost about $240,000 in one day alone, so much so it crashed the site. So many fans were flocking to the D&D Beyond website to cancel the subscription, they crashed the servers. That is incredible. Talk about rolling a nat 1. WotC is screwed unless they run damage control quick. Pushed other tabletop RPG publishers to distance themselves from Wizards of the Coast. Yeah, already mentioned Paizo. I mean, the vast majority of people preferred Pathfinder anyway if they were into more numbers-heavy RPGs, and with them coming up with their own game engine that people are going to start using that will have a much better OGL. I mean, again, the writing is on the wall for Wizards of the Coast. Combine this with what they did with Magic the Gathering in the end of 2022 and it's going to continue into this year. They're burning their two biggest cash cows. They have so many opportunities to save face, but they don't look at us customers as, you know, the people keeping their company alive. They're looking at us as the enemy, as the other. People to beat down to the ground and show that we're wrong and that we're the bad guys. But here's the thing. Companies need customers to thrive. If you're burning your fan base, who do you have left? Look, you can only get so much business off of Stranger Things Season 5 fans going and buying new boxes. Now, some players are suggesting their fellow fans should boycott the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves film. Redditor and D&D fan Super Fun Pop compiled a long post showing why it could be more effective than players realize. They explained that in February 2022, activist investor who owns 2.5% of Hasbro's shares brought forth the idea of spinning off Wizards of the Coast into a separate company, considering the Dungeons & Dragons producer makes a reported estimate of 70% of Hasbro's profits. It obviously didn't want to do that. Oh, here we go. Let's get into some tweets. I love tweets trashing WotC. If you guys didn't see, they had, I believe, 38,000 tweets directed at them yesterday alone, just completely railing them for everything they've been doing to Dungeons & Dragons. I mean, just after the Magic controversy may have blown over, this happens. It's great to see WotC trending on Twitter, and for all the wrong reasons. I've been calling for this company to die for the last, 4 or 5 months now, maybe even more, so it's nice to see everyone finally catching up on that train. TLDR, Hasbro really needs Honor Among Thieves to work out for them, more so than subscriptions to D&D Beyond, and they'll be forced by shareholders to stop messing with the OGL to make sure the movie has a good release. Yeah, that's entirely true. I mean, the movie comes out in April, here we are in mid-January, that means they've got effectively 2.5 months to get stuff back on track, because shareholders aren't going to be happy if this movie bombs. Okay, well this is going to be an incredibly long Reddit post, but it might offer some new information, so let's go through here. To preface this, I'm an investing nerd. The motivations behind Wizards' changes are 100% influenced by Hasbro, and I'll tell you why. Around February 20... Well, I mean, yeah, we already knew that. Hasbro's been the one who has been just bleeding revenue. When even Star Wars toys aren't selling, that's gotta tell you something. Around February of 2022, Hasbro, a publicly traded company, was confronted by an activist investor, an owner of 2.5% shares of Hasbro, who was very outspoken in wanting changes. The change this activist investor wanted was to spin off Wizards of the Coast into a second publicly traded company. You know, I've had the same thought. I'm obviously not near the investing guru as I assume Mr. Investment Nerd here is, but that being said, I think that Wizards of the Coast probably aren't happy with the current state of things. This is all rolling downhill. Papa Hasbro is not happy with it, and Wizards of the Coast has to lick boot and do what Daddy tells them. So if that's the case, maybe there are some good individuals at Wizards of the Coast that don't want to see things like changes to the OGL. Maybe even people that didn't want to sell $1,000 boxes of fake Magic cards. I mean, that's pretty much what it boils down to. Obviously, I can be wrong. Just my hopes is that there's still good people at WotC. That said, my hopes aren't high, considering I think there'd be more pushback internally if that was the case. And maybe there has been. Maybe this just hasn't been leaked. One leading theory is that someone from WotC is the one that leaked the OGL change, hoping for some sort of catalyst to get the ball rolling in the right direction. Now, is there really a whistleblower at Hasbro? I don't know. I feel like if there was, we'd know more information about it by now, but maybe this could be a slow-rolling thing. Let's continue. Without getting too deep into this part, what this would mean is that Wizards of the Coast would no longer contribute to the value of Hasbro and would be its own stock. That would most likely lead to Hasbro's stock becoming discounted. This is because Wizards of the Coast make up roughly 70% of Hasbro's value. This is a direct quote from the activist investor, not my opinion. I added the word may because this is an opinion of said investor. Yeah, you definitely want to stay away from legally incriminating terms here. You don't want to get sued by Papa Hasbro, considering they're so desperate for dollars right now. Hasbro had a public fight over control with activist investor around June 2022, in which Hasbro won. This means Wizards is still owned by Hasbro, but this had a big consequence. Before 2022, Hasbro shareholders had no idea that Wizards of the Coast, D&D, or Magic the Gathering was. Shareholders only knew about Transformers, Monopoly, and Peppa Pig. Man, the fact that... Again, I've said this in a previous video, but it goes without saying. How far does that mean Star Wars has fallen? If people only care about Transformers, Monopoly, and Peppa Pig, when Hasbro does Star Wars toys, you telling me that Peppa Pig sells more than Star Wars? Disney, what have you done? Anyway, they thought Hasbro's money came from toys, TV, and movies. But that all changed in January 2022. Oh, I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that's when Magic crossed the $1 billion mark, but let's see. Wizards of the Coast were on the front page of every financial news source around, including the Wall Street Journal. Then a few months later, it came out that Wizards may be 70% of Hasbro's value. Now every single stock meeting Hasbro has is about Wizards, it's about D&D, and it's about Magic the Gathering. Enter Honor Among Thieves. Honor Among Thieves has been a center point to every Hasbro shareholder meeting since day one of the activist investor battle. Hasbro had to argue that they were the right people to lead Wizards of the Coast, and they did that by hyping up Honor Among Thieves. And to their credit, they hyped it up very well. I mean, again, minus my reservations because, well, Hollywood gonna Hollywood, I've been super stoked for this film. The moment the trailer dropped, I thought it looked great. There were, of course, some hardcore nerd inaccuracies, like druids not being able to wild shape into owl bears, but you know what? If it makes for an interesting, fun movie and cool visual effects, small things like that aren't gonna bother me, and they're definitely not gonna bother the normies who are gonna come to this movie, and it could get them invested in Dungeons & Dragons, sending them out to their local game stores to buy books, to buy figures, to buy miniatures, to buy dice, therefore making the entire revenue stream just go up and up and making Papa Hasbro and Wizards very, very happy. And then all this happened. So, Oh, it's hard to see the investors taking WotC's side on this one. Their history with bringing original IPs to Hollywood, these shareholders don't know what a 20-sided dice is. They don't know what mana costs are. The only wizard in pop culture they can name is Merlin. Okay, let's not discount Gandalf. Come on now. They can't wrap their heads around it. These investors do know movies. They know the Transformers series has been a giant cash cow for Hasbro. They made tons of money off the Transformers movies, and they've hyped up for Honor Among Thieves. All they know is that Wizards made $1 billion in 2021, and that was before Hollywood. Honor Among Thieves might have been one of the only reasons Hasbro didn't lose the battle against activist investors. You know what? That's incredibly fair to say. I mean, there has been so much money pumped into this film, at least I assume so, because you can see it on screen. You can just watch the trailer and realize, oh man, they went all in on this movie. And if that's what the investors want to see, and they want to make Hasbro $1 billion with just a Dungeons and Dragons movie, especially considering they have a lot to make up for with the previous two D&D films that were box office fire. I don't know, there could be a major turn in the tides going forward for WotC and Hasbro, and maybe one that'll actually make us nerds and customers feel a bit more valued. Subs. Subs have been a great tool to show how serious we are about protecting the OGL, protecting our community, and protecting third-party creators. It is not the only tool. Shareholders know what D&D Beyond is, and they know what subscription services are, so are already speaking their language, and it's enough to scare Hasbro a little. Hasbro has to... Yeah, that's true. When you know, it's one thing to, like, be a fan of makeup, or be a fan of movies, you know, things that kind of appeal to everybody, or at least aren't super niche. But then you get into something like Dungeons and Dragons, which is an absolute nerd niche, and what do nerds love? Numbers, crunching numbers, getting into the nitty-gritty of math. These are probably the one subset of fans you don't want to upset because they know how to use numbers in their favor. I mean, how many YouTube channels are there like Rules Lawyer, a D&D fan that is also a lawyer, so he can break down both the law and the legality behind Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, and the law and the rules of the in-game universe in D&D. You're dealing with incredibly smart fans, because you kind of have to be intelligent to be able to successfully play D&D. It's not a game for normies. Hasbro has to prove to its shareholders that it continues to make Wizards of the Coast profitable. If it can't prove it, then activist investors can come back and talk of a spin-off comes back. Wizards still become its own company that's no longer associated with Hasbro. These are still investors who want that. If Hasbro can't deliver with Honor Among Thieves, it's going to look very bad. Shareholders are going to be pissed off. Hasbro's been telling shareholders for a year that Wizards cannot operate on their own, and that the only reason Wizards is making money is because Hasbro is overseeing it, which is an incredibly unfair assertion to make. Look, Hasbro has owned Wizards since, I believe, 2001. Yeah, it's fair to say that way back then, maybe they couldn't do things on their own. They were a struggling company. 2001 and back, you know, the late 90s, early 2000s was a very different era. You didn't have YouTube. You didn't have the internet as the mainstream. You didn't have all these niche, nerdy games and movies and comic books and whatnot being cool. You couldn't walk into the mall to go to your Hot Topic and buy a Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt. No, you walked into Hot Topic in 1999, you were getting a Disturbed t-shirt, and that was about it. So the landscape has absolutely changed, and it's probably going to be better for WotC to be on their own. Now, I say probably, because who knows, so much of this could be internal toxicity that maybe there's no saving them. But it is an interesting concept to really think about and wonder what would happen. Hasbro's had to put their money where their mouth is and dig into the trenches with Wizards to prove they're valuable. Otherwise, shareholders can force Hasbro to spin off from Wizards. This is why we need to boycott Honor Among Thieves. We need everyone to talk about boycotting Honor Among Thieves. The entire financial world is watching Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro right now. And they have been for months. I mean, Bank of America, this probably really started when Bank of America put out that scathing article on Hasbro and WotC in, I believe, October or November of last year about the 40% stock drop. 40% in the fourth quarter. That is bananas. You're telling me right before Christmas you got a 40% stock drop? I guess little Timmy wasn't getting commander decks in his stocking because no one was buying Magic stuff. They're watching this unfold because it's serious business to the investors. If investors wake up to read their morning paper and see in the financial section there's a boycott against Honor Among Thieves, Hasbro will have zero choice but to bend the knee. Not to us, the consumers, but to the shareholders. I mean, that's fair. It's one thing to bend the knee to consumers. We see that happen all the time. Disney is famous for it. Just hop on Twitter, say one negative thing in a left-leaning manner, and Disney will come crying to you apologizing. We don't really see that with Papa Hasbro and WotC though, so maybe this is the best way to do it. Hit them where it hurts, hit them in the shareholders, hit them in the wallet. I mean, that's how fans have to do things anyway, right? Vote with their wallet. Hasbro needs shareholder support or Hasbro loses Wizards. Hasbro will bend over backwards to answer their shareholders, and if their shareholders tell them to stop messing with the OGL, they will stop. Shareholders will put the pressure on Hasbro for us, and currently Hasbro is very sensitive to the needs of the shareholders because they need to keep the majority happy to remain in control. And that will happen if enough shareholders are scared that we will boycott Honor Among Thieves. Alright, well that is the end of that portion. That is brilliant. I mean, frankly, I think that that's the only way to go about it. Rather than us do the legwork, let the big boys with the suits and the ties and the flashy dollar signs and nice Corvettes do all of it for us. Look, the head honchos in their Gucci suits, they probably don't give a damn about Drizzt Do'Urden or Bruenor Battlehammer, but what they do care about is making sure they can keep that shiny Corvette. And they're going to listen to us about Drizzt Do'Urden and Bruenor Battlehammer if they want to keep making payments on said Corvette. I'm just saying. However, almost every Hasbro shareholder meeting since then is centered around Wizards of the Coast, invariably leading to the recent profit-driven decisions with Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering. The OGL changes have been a hot topic, even outside the gaming world. It's no exaggeration to say many eyes in the business world are on Wizards of the Coast right now. This is why a boycott of the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves could be devastating to Hasbro. Super Fun Pop explains the upcoming movie has its chance to break into Hollywood with D&D and make huge profits. If the movie does poorly, talk of the spin-off of Wizards of the Coast could return, something Hasbro wants to avoid. This has caused Hasbro to be even more beholden to the shareholders than usual. To that end, many believe boycotting Honor Among Thieves may be the ticket to forcing Dungeons & Dragons to give up on its attempts to change the OGL. If enough players threaten to boycott the movie, Hasbro shareholders may force Wizards of the Coast to acquiesce to player demands. If it doesn't, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves performs poorly. Hasbro may end up losing Wizards of the Coast entirely in the future. Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves arrives in theaters March 31st, 2023. Well, basically, that is the end of that, and what a brilliant look at this. I mean, I've been over here saying, hey, just start playing other games, move to different companies, don't be beholden to Wizards, vote with your wallet. And that is all true, and I've made little mentions about how this could impact the movie, but this is brilliant. I never once thought that, hey, the shareholders at Hasbro want to see this movie succeed because otherwise Wizards could spin off into its own entity. I hadn't considered that, and I think that is also an excellent route to go down. So, on top of don't support WotC, don't buy anything D&D related, keep canceling those D&D Beyond subscriptions, by all means, keep doing that. That hurts them. But those could be, winning battles, but not the war. Honor Among Thieves, that could be our D-Day. That could be us storming the beaches and bringing down the giant, bringing down the Nazi regime that is Wizards of the Coast. In fact, let's rename them to WOTR, Wizards of the Reich. That being said, that's pretty much all I've got for this. I'm going to go ahead and say, sure, I'm going to jump on this bandwagon. I agree. Let's get hashtag boycott Honor Among Thieves trending. And if you do disagree, let me know in the comments why. Or if you agree and have an additional take, also let me know. Or follow me and let me know on Twitter at BoltTheWord. And by all means, please subscribe. I am really trying to grow the channel. I've got much more videos covering everything from Velma to a Gwen Stefani racist incident. Spoiler alert, it wasn't really racist. But for any new news in the Neurosphere, you gotta come here. So please subscribe, and until then, this has been Words of Paradise.